So, how did we get here? Well, when you constantly bring up your new unclehood coupled with the fact that you have to watch children's programming while babysitting, you wind up getting labeled a Bluey fan by your friends in the inner circle, to the point of swearing that you'll cover the video game if someone gets it for you. In short, and in joke. Still though, that doesn't mean I will cover this title in a different way. The game is a game after all. So with that said, make sure you like, comment, and It was fat! I've never said that in any of my videos before, and I'm not going to start now. So like, comment, and Oh, I think that's my membrane diffuser. Computer, wacky interdimensional demon, sit rep. What do you mean nothing wrong? I've had to clean up my bile juices now, and all you two can say is, nothing was found? You sure you checked everywhere? Gaia? Pylon? Oh. Okay. Well, if I have to live with this now, I'm doing it in my own way. Let me catch my breath. Okay. So, from the top, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe and share the video around. Or don't. I'm not your Uncle T who will close your airway passages after a car accident. You ever wonder why a lot of kids shows focus on the color blue? Bear in the Big Blue House, Blue's Clues, Bluey.
Don't ever do juice.
Why is that? Anyway, if you haven't been living under a rock, you've probably seen this little doggo taking up space either on the TV screen, the toys aisle, or other such places where kids congregate, especially as a parent to a new child, or in my case, an uncle. I mean, you could be watching it on your own time. I ain't judging you. This is a judge-free zone. Welcome to anyone and everyone, even those that are grown adults watching TV meant for little children. But enough about Kamen Rider. Low-hanging fruit. Back on topic. Bluey. This lovable multi-shade Australian healer, an actual chattel dog breed localized to the continent and country of Australia, was born from the merging of a few factors, particularly the wants of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and British Broadcasting Corporation, ABC and the BBC respectively, for a kids show centralized to the Down Under Nation, and the mind of creator Joe Brumm, who's a native of the place. Joe has a pretty interesting career in that he isn't someone new to the game of kids TV. Graduating from Griffith University in '98, he would move from Brisbane in Australia to London, England to work on a variety of shows meant for youngins. His credit on the Brisbane Writers Festival website tells it concisely. Joe Brumm worked as a lead animator for 10 years in London on numerous children's series, including the BAFTA-winning Charlie and Lola. He also worked in Kenyan Tinga Tinga Tales for BBC/Disney. Left out there besides his list of clients and digital shorts as they are in the bio as well, he worked on Kid Icarus's favorite mammal of all time, Peppa Pig. Across the pond for 10 years in the original Queensland, Brumm started feeling it was time to head back home with an idea to mull over. 2009. Brumm returns to Brisbane with a concept for a homegrown version of Peppa Pig, replacing the swine with dogs. It was a relatively massive undertaking for a singular person, so much so that time does that funny thing of moving forward. While the core of Bluey was realized in '09 as an Australia's own Peppa Pig, it wasn't until 2016 when the ball got rolling in terms of having product. Turns out, shocker, that while Peppa Pig is popular, it's not exactly the kind of show Brum wanted to lift wholesale from. As Tom Lamont of The Guardian writes, returning to his hometown of Brisbane in 2009, Brum set up a small animation studio and started to toy with the idea of making an Australian Peppa Pig. There would be sensibility tweaks, Brum decided, better to match his own deadpan humor. The characters in his Peppa knockoff would have biographies closer to those of his own family. Instead of pigs, he wanted dogs. Lastly, something would have to be done about the dad. Offhand, gee, Tom, sure are smart mentioning late-stage capitalism in reference to Bluey. Really, huffing that, whatever it is. I swear, no one who uses that phrase understands the cyberpunk totality dystopia late-stage capitalism actually brings. Like Repo, the genetic opera, or Web 3.0. Anywho, Brum researched all between '09 and 2016 on the concept of play, which you are ostentatiously engaging in right now, at least from my understanding of the concept. Basically, remember back then, or maybe right now, when you found a stick on the ground and pretended it's a sword? That's play. Like, I'm not a psychologist, but the term play is a psychological one when referring to it as a concept that the lights of Sigmund the Mother Man Freud and Carl I am thou, thou art I Jung theorized about. It's a worthwhile discussion to get into, as intrinsically we as a species need play, but that is for another to explain. As a family man, Brum played a lot with his daughters, telling TV Tonight, Bluey is based on the experience of raising two daughters. Playing seems as natural to them as breathing. It's fascinating seeing how much they learn from devising and playing their own games, especially the more elaborate and social ones. So, Bluey is a celebration of the role imaginative play has in shaping healthy kids. We're excited to express this universal message in a uniquely Australian setting. Scrounging up a 1-minute demo reel to show as a proof of concept to studios, taking the bite was almost newly founded Ludo Studio. I say almost because Charlie Aspinwall and Daley Pearson, the co-creators, came together in 2012, so about 4 years before Brum approached them. From 1 minute to 5, Michael Carrington steps into frame and buys the domestic rights to this new show titled Bluey. If you're wondering, Brum and Michael do have a connection via Charlie and Lola, so this wasn't an off-the-cuff sort of dealio. Back to The Guardian for this, Michael Carrington, a British executive who had bought Charlie and Lola for the BBC, was working at ABC and bought Bluey's domestic rights. BBC Studios, the corporation's money-making commercial arm, became its international distributor. Brum and a creative team that included his wife, Susie, got to work on a first season of 52 7-minute episodes that were released in Australia in autumn 2018. And the rest is pretty much modern history. The original run would see a massive success in the former British penal colony, and Disney would wind up getting streaming and distribution rights, leading to it featuring on Disney Junior, or where most of you have watched it, on Disney Plus. It's under this Bluey mania that the game would be made under. Yeah, it's one of those histories today, as handling the reins for the development of Bluey the video game was Spanish studio A-Trax and their UK publisher Outright. You've probably never heard of either, and that's because A-Trax only had 5 games under their belt around this time, 3 of which were on console, the other 2 mobile, and Outright has mostly published licensed budget schlock. The latter's claim to fame is their extensive connections, having gotten the rights to publish titles for Crayola, Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon, and getting to use characters like the Paw Patrol, Peppa Pig, and the Transformers. If ever you wanted to see a vast swath of emptiness, nay a void that would make XDev proud. Just check out the Moby Games pages of both companies. Primo garbage for one Vinny Vine sauce. That said, a connection was formed between 8-Tracks, Outright, and Ludo, another Guardian article giving us this. A relationship with the animation studio behind Bluey and the broadcaster that co-commissioned it granted 8-Tracks and Outright the opportunity to bring on the voice talent behind Chili and Bandit and secure access to Ludo's artwork and materials. On board for the game was a good portion of Ludo and the cast of Bluey to help with visual design, soundscape, and voice work. It helps that production director of Outright, Vincent Grogan, was steeped in the show due to having a kid of his own, probably obsessed with the show. Scheduled for a worldwide release on basically anything that plays video games. Bluey the video game came out on November 17th, 2023, wherein I would make a serious claim to my friends in the inner circle that if one of them bought me it on Steam, I would review it. Here we are now. For those who will be looking forward to a story recap, sad days for you guys, as this is one of those instances where a proper recap is kinda null in the fact that the actual story element of Bluey the video game is the equivalent of a bar napkin pitch. The Healer family essentially celebrates holidays together by getting into a treasure hunt adventure, leading to the moral that actual treasure isn't gold or this bag of jewels I mysteriously found that were intended for someone by the name of Betty, but the memories you made along the way. Fitting with the show and all that, reminded of the cow-horse episode with Indy and Witten that was basically a primer on not giving up. So while somewhat glossy on a recap front, as in you can gloss over it, where the actual enjoyment of the story comes into play is that there are a multitude of callbacks and references to particular stories. Now, I'm not a Bluey stan, nor have I seen every episode in the at least 100 episode series. My brother and sister-in-law have multiple times if their Disney Plus is anything to go by, but even in my casual viewing of the show, I had quite a few Leo pointing at the screen moments. First off, the major story element of the treasure hunt is a variation of the bedtime story episode where Bandit tells Bluey about one of his childhood vacations, leading to the jinx placed on him by his brother Stripe. Funnily enough, the end of that story has Bandit and Chili first meet, roundaboutly enforcing the idea of the game's theme, since I would assume that was a moment in the two's lives that they both treasure. Bit of working in tandem here, an aspect that complements whether you go from the show to the game or vice versa, as they feel like additions to the same overall background. I think what I'm trying to say here is that it doesn't feel tacked on or tired. The treasure hunt feels organic in its usage of Bandit's past in the 80s to weave its own narrative that winds up acting as a partner story to the episode. Not all the referential material is like this, though. We do get cameos from Chattermax and Sticky Gecko that exist purely for the sake of themselves. That said, while I haven't seen the Chattermax episode, thus I don't have attachment to the mechanical cockatoo, Sticky Gecko rolls harder in the deep than most of y'all, and I'll take no slander upon Gecky's name. It is weird, though, that Bluey the video game leans either to one extreme or the other. There's not a lot of in-between, if any, when it comes to lifting ideas from the show. You either get an extended reference, as with the case of Keepy Uppy, or a continuation/supplement to the episode, like with the creek and its message regarding the beauty of nature. If I was cynical to the point of spitefulness, I would complain that the video game could have used the material better, but where's the fun or even sense in that? There's a time and place to be analytical to the point of anal, and this just isn't it, Chief. And I'm not saying this as a don't be critical of children's media take. Trust me, I've seen enough 3D animated puppy shows that they all run together and seem born out of the same vat. But as an aside to why so many people get hyper-conscious of shows for kiddlywinks. Like, remember when people were praising the Paw Patrol movie as real animated cinema to the point of the failed Saw Patrol gimmick as a way of rivaling Barbenheimer? A movement that undercutted animated films as a whole and led to the still wide misconception that animated movies are for kids. God, I feel like I've woken up some sleeper agents, but it's that kind of mentality that I'm against, as it screams of insecure pretentiousness for the sake of defending one's fondness for media not for them. I guess that means at the end of the day I do like Bluey, but I'm not going to preach to you a diatribe as to why it rivals the greatest works of man. The show and the game are cute, and there's a rad uncle named Rad who I clearly identify with, so that's all that matters to me. If you're expecting a fully 2D animated game in the vein of the show, Bluey only uses the traditional animation style for characters within the world. So while the Healer family looks exactly like they do when watching Bluey, the world they inhabit has been bumped up to 3D. I think this merging of styles does have its own ups and downs, as while I think generally the game does look good, there are cracks that tend to appear when the 2 and 3D get a bit too close to each other. Starting with the positives first. Yeah, the 2D characters are animated all quite nicely, keeping the vibes that they have within the show. It's one of those hard to articulate observations, as you either see it or don't. Basically, if you haven't watched or haven't been made to watch the show, you'll probably be wondering why my opinion here is brief and requires only one sentence to cover.
Game over.
Oh,
It's not good. Let's play Keepy Uppy. Travel to the Healer House, the treasure map.
all right, gang. Let's go and meet Uncle Stripe and Muffin at the park.
Oh no.
What? Oh no, not Sticky Gecko. This episode of Bluey is called Rescue. Come on, kids. We're going to be late to meet Muffin and Uncle Stripe.
But I have to catch Gecky.
Oh, Bingo, that's going to take a long time. We'll have to help Gecky get down.
Good idea. Let's grab something to stand on.
It's still too high. We can't get it.
Come on, kids, let's go to the park. I'll get Gecky something soft to land on. Just in case.
Come on, Squirt. We can ask your Uncle Stripe about the next piece of the map.
But if you have watched Bluey, there's an immediate pickup. In fact, while I'm on this train, it is rather hard to make a noteworthy comment on the parts of the presentation connected to the cast themselves, like voice work. As I've had to watch a good few episodes of the show, all the major players sound exactly like they do there for the game. The kids for Bluey and Bingo don't sound any different from show to game. David McCormick still carries the dry upbeatness as Bandit, while Mulaney's Needy keeps it cool and composed as Chili. Even Patrick Brommel's Rad and Dan Brum's Stripe carry the same energy as they do back in the home format, thus my earlier statement of finding any observable delineations like finding the jewels of Galamua.
We found you.
Princess Muffin, we're here to rescue you.
Good. It's Tire Wing waving and looking pretty. This is your reward for rescuing me. Ooh, shiny. Thanks, Muffin.
Let's go, Muffy. We got to get back for lunch.
Okay, Dad.
Oh, girls, was there anything you wanted to ask Uncle Stripe before we go?
Oh, yeah. Uncle Stripe, do you remember making a treasure map when you were a kid?
Remember? How could I forget? I still keep it with me in my wallet.
Really? We did it!
Hooray! Okay, that's enough excitement for today. Kids, can you take Chattermax into the playroom?
Okay, Mum.
What? The girls love it. Well, they're getting exercise. I can pay for that.
Mom! Dad! Help!
The best thing I can say in this scenario is that for the most part it keeps to the quality of the show, though creeping in from the sides of my mouth is this statement. Man, the lip syncing is a bit off. That's by far the singular most distracting detail when it comes to the 2D. Lips struggle to match what is being said aloud. I could also bring up the weird stop and start that the dancing animations have, as there's no fluidity between frames, but back to voices. Characters sometimes struggle to stop talking, particularly when following an objective that has been highlighted for you. After you finish the first episode, go straight to the sticker book to silence Chili, otherwise she'll yammer nonstop about how you should put the piece of the treasure map in the book in what sounds like every 10 seconds. It takes a bit to get me agitated from voice work, but dang does repeating voice clips drive me up the wall. If I may continue my flippancy, the music of Bluey the video game is set to the standard of the show, so expect a lot of upbeat melodies, a few la-las, na-nas, and doot-doos, and generally very feely music. Like, on my own time, it isn't my cup of coffee in the big time, yeah. But for the context of the show and game, it fits, and that's what matters most. You ain't gonna be hearing what's played on modern FM radio if you catch my drift. Mostly because who still listens to radio at this point in time? Any Radioheads still out there? Wait a second. No, where things become a bit more dicey is the meshing of 2 and 3D assets together. But only when they get close. See, the world of Bluey the video game is quite good looking, exponentially so if you're a watcher of the series when it comes to some of the sets you can explore. The healer household is lovingly rendered and laid out for anyone that wants to roam its halls, and though not all the rooms have been modeled like the study or pantry, it is a faithful recreation, even more so since it takes into account spatial awareness of where each room is in connection to the others. A few of you know exactly which game duology based on a long-running animated comedy I'm going to reference later on in the video, as it carries that same factor. A fan's dream come true outside of actually going to the Bluey house in real life. And while even though the other 4 spots the game takes you to aren't as fan-pleasing, they still look good, though generic, as I will cover later. No, where the illusion takes a hit is whenever a character has to touch or interact with an object within the world, as nothing else is 2D. While it doesn't apply to all instances of a 2D character interacting with a 3D object, some of the hats the cast wears blend the two perspectives together quite well. There are some noticeable seams that get torn. Muffin's princess hat looks so awkward on her character model, and she shares that love with everyone else when you unlock it. Some of the costume parts feel way too big for what they're supposed to be representing. A 10-gallon hat on Bluey or Bingo, funnily enough, looks too big on the girls, but why doesn't it fit Bandit or Chili? The bonnet cap that Bluey picks up for the playdate with Muffin kinda just floats on top of her skull like it wasn't properly modeled. You can go through each hat and find these inconsistencies, as some are fine and others not. It is the one major failing of the presentation, however. Outside of the minor oddity here and there, Bluey does look pretty good both as a representation of the show and as a budget title. Bluey the video game is a 1 to 4 player platformer collectathon with a focus on exploration and minigames. If you can't hazard a guess at how difficult the game is, it's obviously one of the hardest titles I've ever experienced, right next to Clapping Party and Gel Archie's Pro Fruit Border. Kidding aside, Bluey the game measures up there as one easy title, with no failure or death sequences of any kind in the main game, besides during the minigames, though that usually just means it is over and you return back to whatever you were doing, unless the minigame is needed to progress the main story like in the first 2 instances of Keeping Uppy. To begin somewhere, as I played the PC version, Controllers are mandatory if you want to play the game. Granted, only 5 buttons, the face ones to be exact for jumping, kicking, context sensitivity, and selecting a minigame, plus pause, and the left stick to move are used throughout the journey, so needing a controller seems more for the fact that kids would find one easier to use, and I can only imagine the goofiness of huddling around a computer as a quartet because someone thought it'd be funny to stick to keyboard and mouse. As such, if you're on Steam or PC, it would be best to either look into SharePlay or Parsec if you want to play with the homies who are not in your immediate vicinity, or use Steam Big Picture Mode hooked up to a TV, as that would be the easiest setup to get the maximum enjoyment of having an ensemble. Segue, that is the first thing you actually do when booting up the game. Pick your character. With 4 members of the healer household, you have sisters Bluey and Bingo, Dad Bandit, and Mom Chili. While on the surface, there's no difference between the 4, because Bluey and Bingo are kids, they sometimes have a harder time reaching higher up areas, and thus either need to move objects around to create a stepping stool, or ask Mom or Dad for help. Usually in the form of either getting one of the bigger characters to grab an item out of the way, or piggybacking, which can only be performed between a kid and an adult character. Going over this now, sometimes when moving objects, you might need 2 or more characters to push or pull it around, which in the situation of playing by yourself or with less than 4 people, whoever wasn't picked will be AI controlled and will lend a hand. With me, the younger brother in my family, I picked perennial keepy-uppy champion Bingo, though if you want to switch out to another healer, all you have to do is pause the game and go to the character select option. Level structure is pretty straightforward in Bluey the game, as besides the opening where you're roped into the first episode where you have to find the lost stuffed animals, then play Keepy Uppy, then get the first piece of the treasure map, you are typically dumped into a level and directed to do objectives. While I've already kinda gone over what it's like with what I've said above, here's another example. When you finish the first episode, you get dumped out into the healer house, where you can either explore to find various collectibles to unlock costumes or interactable objects, play any mini-games you have unlocked, which you gain after beating an episode, so at this point all you have is Keepy Uppy, or go to the sticker book to begin the next episode, or check on your progress with what collectibles you have. Or, after beating the game, replay an episode. Technically speaking, Bluey is open world, though you are hard-lined into following an episode when you choose to do one. That's because after you beat one, you unlock whatever location you were just at for free roam to find more collectibles. Of those, there are 4 groups: stuffed animals, sports equipment, trinkets, and plants. The first 3 can be freely grabbed, though animals and equipment get added to your fun box so you can pull them out in specially marked fun boxes throughout the worlds, while trinkets come in 4 sets of 3 per world. So in total, 12 per world, split into 4 groups, each containing 3 of the same item. Getting all 3 in a set unlocks a panel for the final picture in the sticker book. Plants, meanwhile, require you to water specific plants in the world to gain their sticker. By playing mini-games outside of episode-specific requirements, or by finding collectibles, you gain star points, which unlock hats for the healers to wear, accessible by the hat bin that is usually next to the fun box. And that's it, really. The main game is quite short, with 100%ing the title adding about 30 minutes to an hour to your runtime. I say this looking at my 2-hour recording session. Honestly, feels like a good while since I've played a game where co-op multiplayer actually felt needed to get the full experience of a title instead of playing alone like the sad sap I am. Tangent, I know technically Helldivers 2 and Monster Hunter are multiplayer games, but my brain places them into a different category as I don't use the co-op modifier when describing both. Because, yeah, Bluey the video game does take full advantage of its drop-in, drop-out format, both in the main story and in the minigames. Now, there is the usual specter pervading Bluey like with other games with drop-in style multiplayer. God knows I remember what it was like playing the original LEGO Star Wars as the younger brother who almost usually never went where he was supposed to go, causing chaos, or struggling with the likes of Tag 3, The Great Juju Challenge, because Why is that entire game on a time limit? I mean, I could also put Resistance Fall of Man here, as the memories of my first time completing that game are directly connected to the split-screen co-op nature of that title, but I think I've opened enough seething scars from my past for one video, thank you very much. Bottom line, someone is going to be doing some shenaniganing, but with how weird my brain works, see the top of this tab, I think that kinda sells the game, as there is a somewhat chaotic energy to the healer family dynamic. Like, the very first scene in Bluey the video game is Bandit doing the back to bed joke like he's done in the show, where he has entertained his kids for the moment, meaning his job is done and could go back to lazing about. I think one of the best showcases for how the family works is Dragon, where you see that while Bandit and Chili are responsible parents, they aren't above having a bit of fun with their kids or joshing around with them. Drop in, drop out same screen multiplayer captures this freneticism, as there's nothing stopping any player from being a big old jokester to everyone else. That is a common happening in the show, whether it be Bandit putting a kibosh on what the girls are doing, or one of the sisters getting into trouble. Sadly, I can't think of any moment where Chili is the one being a goofy butt. So to be able to replicate that in the game because of how it is formatted is a massive positive. All it takes is a bit of getting into character for whichever one you're playing, and I can see families having fun just acting out as the cast. As a wise old sponge once said that I will paraphrase, all you need is your imagination. Which, when you think about it, is the basis for many of the games the girls play in the show, and if you've ever had to take care of a kid, is a need regardless if you have toys or not. I know I've gotten into character as a race car whenever I push my niece around in her little Tykes buggy. Moreover, this lends itself to some of the aspects of the gameplay in that Bluey and Bingo do need Bandit, Chili, or each other to get past certain obstacles. A few times you might need 2 characters or more, as the Rock in the Creek needs all 4 to help push or pull an object, facilitating camaraderie or teamwork, thus meaning everyone who is playing has an important role in helping the group. To go even further with this, because Bluey and Bingo are kids, they can't reach higher up spaces unless they move objects around to give them platforms, or by approaching either Bandit or Chili for a piggyback ride. 9 times out of 10, it is quicker to opt for a piggyback to reach an out-of-the-way item than to try and stack or shuffle chairs or books around, leading us back to what I said regarding teamwork. Now, while you can still achieve everything in the game by yourself if you're flying solo, these intended facets of organic cooperation are lost and make the experience incomplete as a result. And it goes without saying, with more players, especially if we put Bluey the video game in an ideal situation where there are 2 kids controlling the kids and 2 adults the parents, the more likely one of the elders can help a younger. Key example, a collectible in the park requires clever usage of a seesaw to launch a character upwards to grab it. A child might not know about the effects of momentum or how energy travels between objects, but an adult can see how the seesaw works and nudge a kid towards the answer by getting them to stand on the opposite end to act as a counterbalance before launching them. As a bit of an analog, it reminds me when I was younger and would ask my dad for help when it came to certain sections of video games, the one springing to my mind at this instant being the button-mashing minigame in Star Fox Adventures against the champion Lightfoot. Debate Scrum-esque word association, the minigames you can play in Bluey, while having their own issues that I'll get to in the next tab, take that family involvement to the nth degree. Whether it be directly cooperative like in Keepy Uppy and Ground is Lava, or competitively like with Chattermax Chase and Magic Xylophone, Bluey the video game wants to make sure everyone gets in on the fun. True to what I said, once you have unlocked a minigame, you can play it wherever as long as it appears in the wheel. And for Ground is Lava, you get wholly unique course layouts depending on where you decide to play it. This includes having to avoid sprinklers or rely on trampolines to grab stars, which, while minor in the grand scheme of the game, Being able to dress up your favorite member of the healer household is another neat aspect that the game takes from the show. In fact, depending on which hat you put on as a character, you'll get a direct quote from an episode that featured said costume piece, like the shiny heart doodle boppers or any of the crowns. I do wish there were more costume pieces other than hats and one set of butterfly wings. Characters do love to play dress up in Bluey, but there's a pretty good selection to sift through, and funnily enough, while I was still gathering them, I felt like I was going through TF2 flashbacks, seen as a reward for playing minigames or finding the ever collectibles in Bluey was hats. Something that did surprise me during my time with the game was the level of interactivity the world has. You can pick up and toss around a lot of items in the healer household, and there are physics at play, like with the aforementioned seesaw or the trampolines you can bounce higher on when you correctly jump on them. Slides even work, though in those situations it is performed with a button press, but I've played a few games that have had slides that don't let you do that. It do be the little things sometimes. And it goes without mentioning, as the last thing in this tab, Red makes an appearance, so 10 out of 10. I'll make the rules. Probably the first instance in this show's lifetime that I'm bringing this up as an issue, and it's price. Now, typically, I'm not one to complain about video game prices in the instance of the fact that Vidya isn't a buy and dispose type medium. You're meant to play games multiple times, whether back-to-back as the new, or in a yearly capacity a la what I used to do for Tales of Symphonia. Movies and books share this factor, and is one of the few uniting aspects of the mediums. I find this separate from the growing price problem, or dare say the live service issue, we've been facing as of late, where a new title is $70 or more depending if there's a collector's edition or not. That I find indefensible, and it's not like the higher price tag for AAA games are actually going to the teams working on the projects, or to better standards across the board, especially since sales for games happen regularly enough on either Steam or proper affiliated sites like Humble Bundle that paying full price for a modern game is a lot like signing up for a 7-year phone contract. You feel real stupid. It can't be understated. Bluey the video game is a budget title going for $40 new on Steam. Steep is a term to be thrown about, especially with how threadbare the title is. For a comparison, Reimagine 2 and 3, a triple and AA effort by Capcom respectively, cost the same amount new on Steam in my region of the world, without factoring sales that happen pretty constantly for the Reimagines that take them down to about $10 a pop separately, or $15 together. If we want a game in the same age range ballpark, as Resident Evil is hardly for little Susan or Billy, for $10 more than a new copy of Bluey is LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga on many of the same consoles that the contemporary is on, or if you want to shell out a bit more, whatever is the new modern first-party Nintendo release at the time. So, Pokemon, Mario, Animal Crossing, Kirby, franchises that have stayed squarely in that fun for the whole family wheelhouse. If I want to get even more disparaging with these price talks, Fortnite is free, and while I don't expect a younger child to enjoy the main Battle Royale mode, with the new additions to the game like LEGO Survive, Rocket Racing, Fortnite Festival, and however many player-made game modes that have been crafted, you can find something that your kid enjoys. And while I don't think this is a fair comparison to make to round out this bit on price, mostly because this is heavily weighted in its favor, emulation of older games is still a viable option if you are a PC-heavy player with kids. Or if you own a Steam Deck, another can of worms to open. Everything I've listed above sits somewhere around double to AAA in terms of development by the by, costing only slightly more or definitively less than Bluey, which, I need to mention again, is a budget title going for $40 new. So what do you get for $40? Honestly, not much. While I did applaud in the good tab the fact that Bluey the video game wants the family to get in on the whole fun, the fun to be had is limited in scope. It boils down to exploration minigames and collecting the various stickers for the sticker book. And if we dig further in, you can find fault lines in each section. Exploration-wise, only 2 of the 5 locations in the game were all that interesting to look through, the Healer House and Park. Obviously, as akin to the South Park RPG duology, the house is modeled faithfully and gives a complete floor plan like how we know how the town of South Park is laid out now due to Stick and Fractured. But the house and playground, as it's the one featured in the Creek episode, are the only notable locations. The rest are just kinda generic. The Creek is basically every nature trail you've seen. One location slot is taken up by the healer's backyard, which isn't a separate location, and the beach is a beach. Bluey has unique locations within the show, like Glasshouse Primary and the Kindy for schools, the Big Peanut for tourist locations, a variety of stores and shops like Golden Crown and Hammer Barn, and of course other characters' homes like Muffins, Mackenzie's, Chloe's, and so forth and so on. It feels weird that exploration is so boxed in when Bluey the video game could have easily given us a somewhat detailed look at her neck of the woods in Brisbane. You know, give us a right proper peer behind the veil that a lot of licensed video games have the propensity to do. I want to see more of the world, but sadly Bluey the video game doesn't indulge in that fan service slam dunk. On to the mini-games. Having only 4 means it is quite quickly and easily to get tired of the selection. Doubly so since of the lineup, Ground is Lava is the only one that takes into account where you play it with different course layouts. Keepy Uppy is by far the worst, as it's a bog standard juggling game with nothing to distinguish itself from other games of that nature besides name, and while Chattermax Chase and Magic Xylophone are variations of King of the Hill and Freeze Tag correspondingly, they don't radically change like in the case of Ground is Lava. I do think they're good minigames, as I can see even people my age getting a kick out of the games of Keep Away because there is a designated person to mess with or avoid, especially Chattermax due to the stun mechanic it has when stealing the bird. But only 4 minigames? 4? Where's Dance Mode? Where's Controllers? Where's Farmers? Where's Shadowlands? Where's Barky Boats? Where is Grannies? There is a dedicated page on the Bluey wiki to all the games the girls, their friends, and their parents play, and note how all those I listed would work with 4 players. If you have the entire Bluey catalog at your disposal and can think of only 4 games to include in the video game adaptation, that's a you issue. And you don't have to make the games too complicated or complex either. The 4 included don't take that long to understand as an adult or to explain to a kid. To drive one last nail in the coffin for the minigames, you can go out of your way to recreate a few sports with the balls you can find, like volley or basketball. I had more fun doing that than rerunning Keepy Uppy, though sadly there isn't an achievement for scoring a dunk like there is in Deus Ex Human Revolution. Rounding out the trio, the collectathon elements are simply there. There's not much to say about them besides that they are used to unlock costumes, which you don't need to find every trinket to get all the hats, and playing minigames does the same thing, and award you with a screenshot of the healer family at the beach. The only ones worth scouting for are the animals and sports equipment, as you can drag those out and play with them like I said earlier. The worst though are the plants, as they don't call attention to themselves, and your only hints that they exist are the bottom row of stickers in the sticker book that I only noticed near the end of my session with the game and feeding Chattermax, though in regards to the second of those, I thought that was simply a step in that episode, not a game-wide mechanic. Again though, outside of completionism, once you have all the costumes, there's no reason to water the plants as they don't give you anything unlike these stuffed animals, sports equipment, or trinkets, even if what you get for finding all of them is a lackluster reward. I think if I were to step away from all these elements I brought up though, the biggest issue I have with the game is that it just kinda ends. There's no grand ending cinematic cut to credits like in other titles I played for the channel. You get the treasure, Bandit tells the lesson to Bluey, flash cut to the beach, and gameplay resumes, but at that instant, you've beaten the game. I don't want or need a climactic ending for Bluey the video game. An ending would suffice, but we can't even have that. And just from going off the episodes I've seen while babysitting, there are some endings that are quite memorable. The one I always think of is Rain, but there's the aforementioned Dragon, Army, Double Babysitter, and the list goes on. Bluey episodes don't just end with no fanfare, but this game does. I mean, it was either this or the glitches, because man, does it feel like Bluey the video game is held together with duct tape, glue, tears, and hope at times. The most notable one I experienced was losing Collision, thus Bingo could walk through anything and everything. While comedic, it does make parts of the game impossible to play, though thankfully it can be fixed by reselecting characters from the pause screen. I've heard of worse glitches happening, so be aware. I'm definitely split in two when it comes to Bluey the video game. On one hand, I do like how it's built from the ground up with 2 or more players expected to join in the adventure, with many of the gameplay beats feeling incomplete when you are by yourself. I can't recall the last time I played a drop-in, drop-out style title that felt like this, as even LEGO Star Wars and TAC 3 could easily be finished by your lonesome. The attention to world detail is also a feather in the cap for Bluey the video game. A fully explorable rendition of the Healer household, or their then house, as I think they've moved since then, will appeal to both kids and adults who watch the show. The other boot, I can't overlook the price tag, and I'm saying this as someone who got the game free via friend gifting. Not to pull an Angry Joe, but 2 hours? There is a distinct lack of content, with only 4 major minigames taking up center stage next to the collectathon elements. While it is nice that the minigames take on different arena shapes where you play them, making Ground is Lava the best of the bunch because of its wide variation, what you see is what you get. Like, Bluey the video game feels simultaneously like a love letter because the Healer house is beautifully detailed, and a cash grab because some parts of the design are lazy. It goes without saying only true Bluey fans would get anything out of the game, and even then, there's stiff competition if you want to get a game for your kiddlywinks that you can play with them. And just like that, I managed to get through this whole video without 1 swear word and only 2 cases of gross bodily excretion. We call that a new record. Hold your applause. Fragrant Borderlands 2 reference, dock 20 points. And yeah, I ain't lying, this is another video in the same vein of Danger Zone, but I at least had a lot more fun with this game than that one. Speaking of, hang on, I have an outro to do. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime Reels where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share. Or don't, I ain't your Uncle T. And as always, this showing of Bluey the video game is over, but stay tuned for our next feature, the Cretaceous contest for the PlayStation 1 console. Warpath, Jurassic Park.